as a graduate of Landmark and somebody who participated and coached the Introduction Leaders program, the methodological approach to me is the most extraordinary, example, you know, of modern ontology that exists today. You know, and those experiences are profound and powerful for the majority of the people who attend the programs. It's unfortunate, to see that there appears to be, problems within the leadership and management. But the way that I conceive of that is simple. It really relates to the primary challenge of transformation, to share it. And the reality is that people all share an entitlement to their brokenness. And that gets challenged within this process of transformation, not by invalidating it, but by distinguishing it. But some people are very, very uncomfortable looking at themselves. And we don't have control of that. And so there's people that will leave day one, there's people that might go to an introduction, there's people that will have experiences, and they share those negative thoughts and their subjective opinions about the organization. But, when you think about that and then you look at that and say 30 years of that, you see, I believe that it's possible that as an organization, always having to essentially defend yourself against the subjective world of ordinary psychology, where it's this elephant in the room where people who participate in ontological experiential transformation transcend psychology, that the types of breakthroughs available in the Landmark Forum are absolutely, unequivocally unattainable in any form or methodological approach in Western psychology. And Western psychology has essentially an entitled monopoly, similar to the dogma of the Catholic Church that would burn someone at the stake. The priest lighting the fire would do so with the best of intentions, likely crying, like, this is going to hurt me more than it hurts you, kind of a deal. And so, you have to kind of wonder, an organization that has a hierarchy from source, if you will, where Warner is still, as far as I could tell, the methodological pioneer, that his creative mind, his ability to take something like meditative enlightenment, that if you look before the genesis of these approaches, nobody really had any concept that you could produce these types of breakthrough results in these short time frames. That if you watch Alan Watts, who might have been an influence, you'll see that, the experience of enlightenment was still sort of in the domain of mystical experience. And there's many words to describe it. And if anybody, was to discover an easier or rapid path, those constitute breakthroughs in causing breakthroughs, if you will. And so they wouldn't understand that we could do this back then. So you could watch a book being read, that would give you some insight about that. That, within the story, told by Alan Watts of a particular individual who wanted to reach enlightenment, it was a 30-year journey of meditation where he's given a single koan and then meditates on it for 9 years and then comes back. And so I had a series of epiphanies, and reaching the space of everything nothing that we see on Sunday at the Landmark Forum was a 30-year journey, where in meditation, the challenges of turning off these same reactionary devices is one of a neurological challenge, where the always and already listening is running, and somebody's trying to fix themselves. Somebody's trying to turn it off. And that can happen in any kind of time frame that would be unpredictable. And so, bringing that into existence as we have, it's a radical deviation from convention. And it is going to be a major challenge to run an organization that does things that defy the conventional wisdom of Western psychology and also addresses, people and empowers them to be able to let go and overcome, what we term as inauthenticities, by looking at being, the continuum between the experience and the necessitated being within the experience. That is so outside the boundaries of psychology that tries to fix and change the person through understanding and, forfeits the power to the past, to trauma. And people without understanding continue to trigger themselves by re examining and visualizing the same experiences for years with no efficacy. And so we live in a world that appears to be in psychological decline. And so, I would have to imagine as an organization how decades of dealing with that, decades of dealing with bad press or dealing with people that could be, writers that come and, you know, audit or infiltrate and, come there specifically with a subjective, agenda towards exposing or things like that. What I would expect is that over time, that has had a profound, you know, influence on the culture of the organization. That is something I see as segregated from the leadership of the people that actually produce the transformational experiences. And so, why that's of a concern to me is that I'm seeing videos of former staff members and people that I was initially interested in, just understanding, what was going on from their experience. But, what I saw was very concerning because people that would remain on staff for decades suddenly are victims, suddenly in therapy, suddenly, you know, completely negating and devaluing the organization as well as its methods, and then even in those videos, clearly sharing things that appear like emulation, like somebody that is, you know, acting as somebody that has experienced transformation. But what I will also say is that there are absolutely certain personality types that are pathological and highly numerical, like a strong percentage of our population that would not respond the same way to the methodological approaches because not everybody has the same architecture. That there are people that have a purely fear based subjective reality that originates in infancy and forms a particular presentation of emulated behavior, of grandiosity and profound victimhood. And in this context, these people are very attracted to organizations that deal in transformation like Landmark. A, because they can hide within it. B, because they get a lot of grandiosity out of being in that environment and being in positions where they can try to aspire to climb up the hierarchy. And that is going to be a corruptive influence on the culture because they highly, highly negate, oppose, they're entitled to being abusive, and, they twist the context of transformation and notions of integrity. You see, people that are driven in a hierarchical manner, are going to fly under the radar. People that are masters of emulation and often don't have the awareness to know the difference. And they're positively impacted in environments where the listening is really good, but they are dependent upon that constant reaffirmation for the falsehood of an inauthentic identity that is merely emulating transformation. And I've encountered those individuals directly, both in my personal life, friends group, and people that I attended with, in these courses. and even people that are, part of the organization, that they go undetected, yet they have a profound corruptive influence in any environment they're in. And they're often the ones that will experience a profound subjective collapse, meaning if their identity was tied up within the organization and then they just decide that no more, they become victims. And then their entire architecture of the way that they choose to see totally invalidates and negates it, because they need to segregate themselves from that identity, and everything they did was false anyway. And so they project that narcissism onto the organization as if the methods themselves are false because they are. And so they emulated it, and so they could not really experience transformation anyway. And they're acting. And so when I listened to the video, I was, struck by that awareness. That the organization will have problems from within, from these types of people. Because the interesting thing was, is some of the things that they were complaining about were also things that they participated in, meaning that they would blame the culture of the organization for their own lack of integrity, for their own abuse, for their own being cruel or mean to people or pressuring people. You see, people like this don't really understand transformation. They don't really understand the calling of it. And so, the ones that are blowing the whistle, I don't really see are being totally objective, because you're throwing the baby out with the bathwater. That it is possible there are some cultural challenges for an organization of that scale, you know, but, there's also going to be the fact that there are going to be these types of people in leadership there, in legal, in particular areas. And, I would say that coupling the integration of these personality types in a hierarchical environment with the societal pressures that transformation is always going to face. It's the same energy that nailed Jesus to the cross or shot a Martin Luther King. People are entitled to victimhood. People are entitled to maintain their dogmatic subjective reality. And you're always going to have that profound challenge when you're confronting convention and inviting people to let it go. And so, given that that's always going to be the climate for something like this, I can understand how that alone over several decades, and the way that we sort of conceive of source, coming from the top down as far as awareness and transformation itself goes, I could see that this, would present a challenge for an organization that is all about transformation, and so the ego is a very, very challenging and insidious thing, even for the most enlightened people, and especially within groups and bodies, that there may just be a disconnect in us versus them, a slow and insidious change within the organization based on the realities of the world outside of the organization that continue to try to chip at it. And so, as a sort of a defensive response to that, it just may be the case that the body, even within the transformation itself, meaning the leaders that are like landmark forum leaders, may have slowly over time become a little less objective about the inner workings of their organization, as some of these practices may have gradually just occurred as necessities, and the lines of integrity have become blurred, and the attachments to numbers and statistics in the preservation of, the ability to propagate transformation has just slowly deteriorated to some extent. And so, from the outside looking in, and even in some of my interactions with leadership on a personal level recently, I would say that it is absolutely the case that they are experiencing somewhat of a threat to the organization. that with changes recently and with just the climate of the world we live in, there is a deterioration and decline that's occurring socially to the mental well being of people with trolling and some of the most inhumane, behaviors and things that we're seeing online. I would suspect that, the organization has been affected by that. Not to take away their responsibility, but it's not something that couldn't be fixed, managed, or mitigated. But trying to tear it down is absurd because it's really just, you know, not an acknowledgement of the fact that the programs are delivered in a way that's extraordinary, that people absolutely experience transformation, and that needs to continue. And however it continues, with Landmark or without, but transformation itself is important. And we're still talking about human beings. And so when you take a look at the whole picture of millions of people having gotten their lives out of the work, that's really where the focus needs to remain. That can't be understated or devalued in the pursuit of, you know, dealing with personal issues in your employment, because it's not, you know, it's not necessarily representative of the entire whole of the organization from center to center. And there may be some of that. I've experienced it myself, but I don't hold transformation accountable or the leaders that did the work to be able to propagate this important, social construct. It's a continuum, and we need to continue, down the path of getting things right socially. So, I have more of an objective view as it pertains to Landmark. I can't say I have specific insight about what's going on, but when I'm seeing more of this kind of whistleblower stuff, I wanted to check it out for myself, but I found it completely lacked integrity. It was very bothered by it, but I don't think that that's going anywhere. When I listened to one of the people talk in particular, cussing, it was just undignified, lacked integrity. He was seemingly very grandiose and very, very much obsessed with Werner Erhard and very much trying to devalue and negate the person and even negating the entire world of transformation as some kind of hoax. Well, the only hoax is the person. That's just being a narcissist and a victim. He even said on the video something to the effect of like Landmark had, tried to convince him that having, been assaulted as a child was his fault. And it's like, I mean, when he said that, I already knew the deal. It was just victim 101. So somebody that's just a victim, this is completely irrational. It's totally, totally nonsensical. And so I'm not going to really support that kind of stuff, like an objective view where you could acknowledge the work, the power of it, and address, the concerns of your own personal experience without necessarily taking that and projecting it to the whole of the organization would seem to be a little more meaningful than wanting to tear it all down for no reason. Because when I see people making those videos, my concern is for the people that would watch that and not go get their life. Not go get their life. If there's something that you got to deal with as a staff person, then deal with that. But when it comes to the course itself, there is nothing that I could ever imagine has been in any way, shape, or form, distracting from that. If I go to a Landmark forum, it's like getting a Big Mac, like wherever you go, it's the same product. That there's an integrity to transformation that, in my view, is unquestionable. And so we don't want to pretend that that is invalid, because it isn't. And whatever there is that needs to be worked out structurally or within the hierarchy of the way that they manage, that's a segregated issue. And so when you're putting things out there that's affecting, potential people that could get their life out of the Landmark Forum, I have a problem with that. Definitely. Definitely. Because it says that whoever's doing that, it's in a way very, very selfish. Now, maybe there are some real problems. Maybe, Landmark's going to come crashing down, or maybe there is, some level of corruptive influence at the top. I don't know. But, you know, I do know that transformation's real. I know what I've seen, witnessed, and experienced in my own life. And I know that I'll always be grateful for that experience. And, you know, um, ontology is ontology, and the methodological approaches are profoundly powerful and proven. And that's really what it's about.